Teshadale, welcome to the AWAM Tibetan Buddhist Institute and our Heart Essence of Tibetan Buddhism class. This is number 19 in the sequence that we are doing. So we begin by taking a deep breath in and then just letting that go out slowly, calming your mind and body into profound peace. And just do that maybe 3 times. And then we take refuge. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. So today we are continuing chapter 15 with the highest yoga tantra and the completion stage, which includes some preliminaries as well as peaceful, wrathful, and so forth that we've gone through already. And so now to the completion stage, which we're going to divide into 3 parts if everything works out over these 3 weeks. So the first part of this, we'll give a little bit of an introduction to this to set the stage, and then we're going to take a look at purification and vase breathing practices, and then vajra recitation, the channels, winds, and drops as a practices, sometimes referred to as tsalung, and then inner heat or tummo, and the 4 blisses or 4 joys as a part of it. That's a lot of things to try and cover in one teaching, but we'll do the best that we can. These are not always done as really deep dive kinds of practices in the Tibetan tradition. And so we'll do a way of introducing that. It's the kind of thing that we think is important to do some practices for, but it's not the kind of thing that you need to really make a deep dive commitment to, although some people do. In the tradition, some of these are completely separate branches of Tibetan Buddhism. And so they may have one particular thing, like tummo, that they just completely focus on that one thing. And so we look at it in kind of a combination of all of these as a set, but it's not always treated that way in Tibetan Buddhism. Anyway, so now the highest yoga tantra completion stage practices are often embedded in what's referred to as the 6 yogas or dharmas of Naropa, or the 6 yogas of Niguma. The 6 actual practices vary somewhat from different sources, and packaging them in different combinations. In general, these include vase breathing, vajra recitation, channels, winds, and drops, and or inner heat, the tummo, illusory body, dream yoga, clear light, transference of consciousness, or poa, and intermediate state, the bardos. The exact content of these also varies from one tradition, one lineage to another. So there's a lot of variety here. And so adding a rich array of practices available in the path of Tantra. So we are now moving into this more esoteric aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. These sometimes include all of these, but various lineages as a kind of hinting. Pick and choose, often selecting only a few or even just one for focus. Thus, we will be including multiple practices each week. And so do the best that you can and do at least one of these or do each of them at least once as a part of this so that you get a feel for what they are like. We're going through them pretty fast, so we're not going to have enough time to do the number of repetitions that might be ideal for this, but you can continue on with those afterwards as we move on through the teaching aspect of this as well. And so we're first looking at the phases of the completion stage practices. So this is kind of a framework for these in general. And these can be wildly diverse in the way that they are taught and the way that they are practiced. First, you master the previous generation stage of peaceful and wrathful yidam yoga practices to the point of having a stable experience in meditation and post-meditation with pure view, seeing all beings as Buddhas, all sounds as mantra, all thoughts as wisdom of the Buddhas, and all phenomena as a pure Buddha field, whether real or imagined. Viewing all beings as Buddhas can be controversial. What about the bad guys? Okay, so are they also Buddhas? Well, this principle refers to one's innate Buddha nature, not their actual actions. As Padmasambhava said, my view is vast as space, my actions fine as barley flour. So we be cautious about understanding pure view as the true nature of all beings. The idea is that there is this essence that we all embody, the Buddha nature, and yet we are not all true Buddhas in everyday life, okay? So that is the thing, the difference between those. And a lot of times in Buddhism, they talk about it as if you're already always a Buddha, and that's all we are learning to do, is to be a Buddha and to recognize everybody else as a Buddha. But I think it's more important to make that difference between the relative and the ultimate aspects of things. So we want to be cautious about the true nature of all things. The true nature of things is not the same as what is sometimes referred to as crazy wisdom. Nevertheless, we view all beings as Buddhas in the sense of having that innate Buddha nature. Okay? Then you continue the practices of the completion stage. One of the classification system organizes these phases of completion stage practices into 6 different categories. So here I've also included the main practices that are attributed to Padmasambhava, which is the source that we're using for these courses. This is one showing the links of the practices to the accomplishments on the path. The first one of those is through vase breathing. The vital energies or winds enter into and abide in the central channel. We'll look at the channels and explain that. And you are isolated from viewing the world as ordinary. You begin looking at it as very different. The second one is verbal isolation. So this is through a practice called vajra recitation. The vital energies dissolve into the central channel at the heart chakra, but not into the heart chakra. It's at that level, but it's not in that yet. And you are isolated from ordinariness. The third one is mental isolation. So we're going through basically body, speech, and mind here in these first 3. And these are through the tummo and tsalung practices. The 4 blisses and 4 empties are included there, as well as dissolution into clear light. And the empties manifest due to the dissolution of the winds into the indestructible drop at the heart. We'll learn about that later. You are isolated from concepts. So you transcend the very idea of conceptualization of these things in practice. Number 4 is the illusory body. These refer to subtle winds that manifest as the yidam, or the Buddha, Practice with a tantric consort causes the winds to dissolve into the indestructible drop, and the impure illusory body approaches the pure illusory body of a Buddha. So the tantric consort can be either real or imagined. I caution people about doing those practices because they've caused a lot of problems. The main thing is, I think it's most important if you're doing that is if you do it with a spouse or partner, okay, rather than just somebody else in the group of people that you know. So then the fifth one is clear light. From the most fundamental level of consciousness, rigpa, or pure awareness, you experience emptiness directly. The winds are completely dissolved. The semblant clear light is conceptual, approaches the actual clear light. So in the beginning, we learn about the clear light mentally, conceptually, but then we, through our practice, experience the actual clear light as a part of that. The sixth one in this sequence are the learner's union. This means the winds begin to move again through the union with the consort, again visualized. Actual clear light and pure illusory body arise as the one taste, and you achieve Buddhahood. Okay? So I've organized the completion stage practices following this pattern. As with so many other cases, there are differences in the approaches based on the school, the lineage, and in some cases, even the Lama. We began with the practices of purification, vase breathing, vajra recitation, the channels, winds, and drops, or tsalung tigli, or just tsalung, and actual inner heat, or tummo. When we move to the four joys or blisses and the dream yogas and the pure illusory body with the four empties, and then finally the clear light. And there's some other things later on as well. So there's a lot here. It's a lot to try and learn. It's a lot to try and practice. So we start with the purification and vase breathing practices. Now, these are considered to be preliminary practices. They're not one of the 6 that I mentioned there. So the purification is a form of 9-round breathing, is the way that it's often described. And vase breathing, they're combined into the first completion stage preliminary practices taught by Padmasambhava. And so this is practice number 25, the 9-round purification and vase breathing. So practice these as much as you can during the week. And then the sessions may be divided into more if you have multiple times. You can do one in the morning, you can do another in the evening, or maybe you've got openings in the day that you can add other repetitions in there. We do know from science that repetition is more important than time in terms of learning these things. And we began by setting our intention. Why am I doing this? We have a generic one in the text that we use. I do this practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. But it can be any specific kind of intention that you have. And then we recite a brief Nundro preliminary practice with prostrations. This is one of the things that we have already talked about in the preliminary practices of Dzogchen, or not Dzogchen, but Tantra. And then the 9-round purification breathing, which is the focus here. And so there's numerous variations of how to do this practice. So this is just one of them. From stillness of body, speech, and mind, we inhale and exhale as follows, while imagining all negative karma and obscurations are discharged through your nostrils and incinerated in the flames of primordial wisdom, and you are purified. So you breathe in and you get rid of those. It's a little bit like doing Vajrasattva purification. Okay? And so the specifics in terms of this has 3 different stages that we go through. The first one and then the second ones fit together, and we go back and forth between the second and third. So the first one, we block the right nostril. So with our right hand, we take our right index finger and block the nostril and breathe in. And then exhale. And as we're doing that, we visualize the air coming out is red. And that all negative karma of attachment go out into the fire of wisdom. Okay, now previously we talked about the fire of wisdom, and some of the pictures that we have around here, the flames around the outside of the figure, that's what we're talking about here symbolically. And so it goes out in that sense. So again, the right hand, index finger, inhale. Exhale. And we go on to the second one. We block the left nostril here with the left index finger. This time the visualization is a sky blue color. All negative karma of anger into the fire of wisdom. Okay, so we breathe in. And out. Getting rid of the sense of anger. Then the third one is we inhale and exhale through both at the same time. Just visualizing this as black in color, the negative karma of delusion. And that is breathed, as we breathe out, goes into the fire of wisdom. Now we do each of these 3 times. There's 3 different ones. We do each of them 3 times for a total of 9. So that is the way that the practice is done. So let's try that again with the 9. The first with the right. And 3 with the left. And then both. So those are used to get rid of attachment and anger and delusion that we experience in our lives. So it's a purification kind of a practice. The next one that we'll use as a pairing with that is called the vase breathing. So these look at our chakras. And so the chakras are different levels of our body. And so the first one is at our eyebrows, between our eyebrows, if you will. And then the second one is at the throat, then the heart, then the abdomen. It's considered to be the middle of the abdomen. So about where the belly button is. And then what is called the secret place, which is very low in the body. And so first we breathe in, swallow, then press down from your abdomen. You have to tighten those muscles in the abdomen, pressing down, and then the same pressing up from the muscles at the pelvic floor. So you're kind of tightening around your abdomen at that point. And this is referred to as the mystic kiss, in between. And then we hold it as long as you can comfortably. And then winds begin to enter into the central channel as you gently breathe out. So you're breathing in, you're holding and tightening that, and then as long as you can, and then you begin to breathe out and the winds take it out and away. And then we focus on the chakra just below the navel at that point. Then we rest our mind in pure awareness, that is no specific object of focus, just awareness itself, as long as you can. And then we repeat as many times as you can, and then continue to the next practice of vajra recitation, which we'll get to here in a little bit. So this is a physical isolation that is achieved through vase breathing. It's called vase breathing, so your body is like a vase, if you will. The vital energies or winds are said to enter and abide in the central channel, and you are isolated from viewing the world as ordinary. We don't see things as ordinary anymore. It's not ordinary anyway. All you have to do is look at things from the point of view of science. Everything's different than what it appears to be. But this is a different form of that same kind of idea. And the mastery of this practice achieves the first stage of the completion stage practices, if you will. Okay? And so then let's move on to the next one, that vajra recitation that I mentioned here. So as with most practices in Buddhism, there are a variety of methods for doing each of these practices. To the extent possible, I follow those described by Padmasambhava in the book Natural Liberation. This is also a preparatory practice, often recited for 100,000 times. Now, that's the same kind of thing in the preliminary practices that we did, where it was recommended we do everything 100,000 times. But if you recall, there were other options than just doing it by counting. There's options in terms of accomplishment of a certain kind of an experience that you may have. There are also other forms of that. And the same can be true here, but the traditional way of doing things is always based on that counting. And what's being counted here is Om Ahom, which is part of the practice, without breathing practice described below. So the actual practice is the same as the Vajra vase breathing with addition of Om Ahom visualizations. And so this is the Vajra recitation practice. And we do it as a continuation of what we've already gone through doing those breathing exercises. So Vajra recitation, we do as many as we can. And the central, right and left channels are joined in the lower abdomen. And then there are the chakras involved in this. So the central channel and then the two side channels on either side. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail here. And so these began to be involved in the process here. So we inhale, visualizing the winds entering into the side channel. So through the nose, was said to go up over the height of the ear. They're inside of our head, but they go up and down through the sides, and they connect with the central channel down there in the abdomen, where we were looking at it just a little bit ago. And so the vital energies, oops, I'm in the wrong place here, the side channels and into the central channel where they arise as a white Om at your forehead. So it goes into the central channel and up through the center to a white Om. And then these are the physical blessings of all of the Buddhas. Then mentally, we press down into the lower abdomen and then up, gently squeeze the muscles of the lower body up, visualizing a vivid red ah, which is speech. And then the speech of all the Buddhas, and then holding it as long as you can. Then again, we exhale, visualizing a blue hong, the essence of mind of all of the Buddhas, and sending out a stream of Buddhas for the benefit of all sentient beings in all directions, referred to as the 10 directions. So there's 4 cardinal directions, 4 intermediate directions, up and down. So that is considered in Buddhism to be all directions, sometimes referred to as all 10 directions. And so we repeat that as many times as we can. Okay, so we did that purification process at first, and then we continue on with these practices, with the breathing into the central channel, up, Om, back down, up, ah, back down, home. Okay? And then there is a second part to this. We continue with verbal isolation that is achieved through vajra recitation. This is another thing that involves counting. Helps to have a counter for doing these kind of things and following that. And so this is achieved through the vajra recitation. The vital energies now dissolve into the central channel at the heart chakra, okay? But not into the heart itself. It's in the chakra, but it's not into the bindu at the heart chakra. So the mastery of this practice achieves the second stage of the completion stage practices. This is commonly assessed by having completed 100,000 repetitions of Om Ah Hom. Okay, so it's referred to that. A note for that is that the counting for Noondrel previously is one option of counting the 100,000. A counter device, as I pointed out here, may be helpful in that as well. But think about this. If you do one mala of those each day, it's going to take 1,000 days, 3 years. If you do 10 malas a day, that's going to take 100 days, or about 3 months. If you do 100 malas a day, now we're getting up there, that's going to be just 10 days to do that. So it's best done if you do that in a retreat in order to do that. And monastics who are doing these kinds of things, they're doing that. They're going into a retreat and they're doing it, and it doesn't really take that long to do. But lay practitioners like ourselves, it can take quite a bit of time to go through these processes, just as it did when we were doing the early processes of the preliminary practices. So you may continue the practices on, but continue to the next stage as well. But we recommend that you do try to complete those 100,000 of those if possible. So keep a record of how many that you do. You can work a few of those in a day. You can do malas anytime during the day that you have moments to do that. Even if you're watching TV, you can get your mala out and you can start counting your clicker and so forth. I'm very flexible in how we do things. Okay. So those are the preliminary inner yoga practices. So the next one here are the channels, winds, drops, and the visualization, or the tsalung practice. This begins the actual 6 yogas for this. So everything else prior to that is just being preliminary to protect or to prepare for this. So this begins the 6 yogas, which include the channels, tsa, winds, lung, and drops, the tigli or bindu, representing body, speech, and mind, respectively. So it covers a broad category of practices, including most, if not all, of the completion stage practices. Here I've included a simple visualization practice as one step in the process. Padmasambhava did not articulate this step, and so I've incorporated this from other sources. The order of completion stage practices may vary. For example, tsalung may be done after the inner heat practice. In this case, the practice involves visualization without any movement of the winds or the inner energies. The focus is on the channels themselves. Thus, it acts as a preparation for that movement using the same visualization for the inner heat practice that follows. The inner heat is what we're going to be doing in a little while. And then more advanced practices involving movement of winds and drops, and then follow the inner heat practice. So in the book on page 224, there's a diagram of the images of these. And so I can put this up. I'm not sure how well I can get it on here for the viewers. You can kind of see it there. It looks a little bit fuzzy on my screen. But there's 5 columns here. The first column is a series of lotuses. And so they have a different number of petals. And so in the first one, we have the crown chakra has 32 petals. The next one is at the throat, which has 16 petals. Then the next one is at the heart chakra with 8 petals. And then the last one is at the navel chakra with 64 petals. For some reason, they didn't put them in a logical order. They kind of bounce around just a little bit. But it starts with the 32, 16, and 8, but then it bounces back up to the 64. Now, these then link in with the channels that we were talking about. And so we have the 3 channels, and this gives a little bit more explanation of those channels. So there's the central channel, but here we also have the 2 side channels as a part of this. And so the first one is the Roma. It's on the right side of your body, and it is red. That's convenient. Roma, red, right. I keep all 3 of those together. The second one is the center channel. No convenient link there, but the central channel is called the Avadati, and it is the one that comes down through the center of the body, and it is considered to be blue. Now, some say that it's blue on the outside and red on the inside, okay? So I'll mention that a little bit later. And then the Lalana is on the left, Lalana left, but also white. so the white doesn't have an L letter there for us for convenience. So those are at the crown, which is usually depicted as being between the eyebrows, but sometimes at the top of the head. And then at the throat, the heart, and the middle of the abdomen area. So the third column shows diagrams of what is called the drops. And so these drops are actually expressed as the form of letters from Tibetan letters. Okay, so over here, let's see, over on the shrine over there, you can see the 3 Om Ahung. No, that's okay, thanks. And so they're in pairs because we have 4. So there's 2 pairs for each of those. And one of the unique features of this is that the top one is actually viewed as upside down. And then the next one, right side up, the next one upside down, and then right side up. Okay? So we have Ham and then Om as the first pair. So the crown and the throat. And then we have Hong and what is called an Ah stroke that are the next. Again, it would be at the heart and at the abdomen in those cases. So the next column in the diagram shows a different version of the lotus petals. I don't know why they didn't put them side by side, but they didn't. And so here, these are done in terms of spokes. And so there's little spokes that are going out. So the number of spokes is the same as the number of petals in the other. And I'll go through this in a little bit more detail in a minute, but they are depicted as there is a central figure in there or an object in there, and then number of different things that spoke out, and then there's always 8 of those. And then it divides up depending on the total number, like when we went through the 32, the 16, and the 64. So they go out 8, they break into 2, and then if they need more, each of those breaks into 2, and so forth. And so the diagrams, I'll try to show that up close here. You can kind of see how they have more and how they break up going out as a part of that. They look a little fuzzy on mine. Hopefully they're a little bit more clear if you're watching elsewhere. So we go through this. So the first column shows the lotus and the form of the chakras. The second shows the 3 channels and the branches of the channels at each chakra. The third column shows the drops at each chakra along with their position, the up or the down. And then the fourth column shows the branches as spokes rather than lotuses, and the lotus petals. And then the fifth one shows the colors of each, which is often the case. The details may vary from different lamas or texts. Okay. Nothing that's absolutely consistent in these ways. So there are 3 channels described in this practice. The central channel, Avidatu, that runs from the crown of the head to the 4-finger width below the navel. So that's the central. I refer to it as the belly button, or down below, just below the belly button. And then the crown is variously described at the very top of the head or behind the third eye at the center, as I mentioned before. In some practices, the central channel extends to the secret place, which refers to the sex organs, or even the tip of the sex organ. It is hollow and about the size of an arrow shaft. So it's thin, it's not solid, it's a shaft and it's empty on the inside. So it doesn't have, so it's hollow. It is transparent with the layer of blue on the outside, the red on the inside, as I mentioned before. Both colors are visible and separate from each other. And so they don't blur together into some kind of a purple type. Then from each of the nostrils, the side channels, as I mentioned before, they start at the nostrils. So you have the right and the left, and then they go up and down. The side channels extend up above the height of the ears and then down the sides of the central channel, slightly smaller and about 1 diameter width apart from the central channel itself. So very close to that. And then the right, or Rama channel, is transparent red. The left, Lalana channel, is transparent white. They extend to the bottom of the central channel, a short version of the central channel, and curve around and into it 4 finger widths below the navel, about the center of the lower abdomen. So they use the 4 fingers as to indicate below where that's going to be. And then at the crown, the throat, heart, and below the navel are chakras or wheels inside the central channel. Each wheel has 8 spokes radiating out, curved either up or down. So when we talked about those figures being up or down, the same is true of the prongs coming out from those. And so at the crown, the spokes are white and curve downward, just like the symbolic letter, Tibetan letter that we mentioned. They are also divided into 32 branches altogether. At the throat, the spokes are red and curved upward. They are divided into 16 branches. At the heart, the spokes are blue and curved downward with no additional branches, just the 8 in the cardinal directions and intermediate directions. And at the navel, the spokes are red and curved upward and are divided into 64 branches. So the branches or channels radiate throughout the body, delivering the winds or energies. The 3 main channels are filled with air, the winds, whereas the branch channels are only partially full of air. So the central channels is filled up, but the branches, the side channels, and the other ones radiating out are not completely full. It is important to keep in mind that these are not physical entities. If the colors or locations of the channels, chakras, etc. vary between texts, use what is described. Okay, so just go with the flow, so to speak, or whatever the text is that you're following, just follow it. There is no uniform fixed system as there is in the Hindu system. They are the yidams themselves. These are not real, but are manifestations of our mind. There are 5 root winds in these channels. So we pointed those out, but I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail. These are rarely described in most practice texts, but I've received the teaching several times, so I included it here. So you get it, whether or not you use it hereafter or not. So the first one is the downward moving winds. These are in the secret chakra. They produce great bliss, are associated with the space element, and are most powerful, but does not last. The second one is equally abiding winds that remain in the navel chakra, are associated with the earth element, produce warmth, heat, and fire, but are not associated with the fire element. I don't know. That's just the way that it is. And then number 3 is the life-supporting winds, which are at the heart chakra. They're linked with the water element, producing our breathing. And then the 4th one is the upward moving winds that are at the throat chakra and linked to the fire element. So here's the fire here instead of associated with the other ones. They help us drink, eat, swallow, talk, laugh, and so forth. And finally, the 5th one is the pervasive wind. Some call it the all-pervasive wind. It is the crown chakra and joints, pervading the body, and is linked to the air or all winds. So if we can, through practice, we control the winds, and then we can remain within the natural state of meditation for a long time. So the winds can throw us off. So if we can control the winds, stabilize those winds, it is said then that we are able to stabilize our practice more. And so then we can just, once we've done that, we can just let them go. Okay, once they're stabilized, we can let go of them. And then furthermore, there is the 7-point posture of Vajra, which is the traditional approach to sitting to do practice, where you fold your legs together with your feet on top of your thighs and so forth. And all 7 different things. I'm not going to go through that, but a lot of us can't actually do that, especially people in the West. Our biology is a little bit different than Asians are. It's easier for them to cross their legs that way. Anyway, so, and some of us as we get older is a little bit harder as well. Anyway, so the next one then, we're going to go on, are related to the drops, which are referred to as tiglis or bindus. They are visualized as tiny Tibetan syllables or spheres like tiny marbles, or the actual letters that we went through in the diagram. In the center of each of the chakras, thus inside the central channel as well. So you've got the channels, and then you've got the chakras at the 5 different places, and so the inside that are these drops. Okay, so again, the first one is at the crown. It's upside down as a white hum letter, representing the bliss and method, the seed of the essence body, which is Swabhavika Kaya, which is a Buddha that's not quite yet fully manifest, if you will. And then the second one is at the throat, a red Om representing the clarity or luminosity aspect, and the seed enjoyment body or Sambhoga Kaya. Okay, so these elements are there to represent these different Buddha bodies, if you will, but they're not yet fully manifest. Our job is to go through the process of making them fully manifest. But they also are sometimes referred to as pairs. So those two, the crown and the throat, the Ham and the Om, are pairs. So remember when we were looking at the different structures, they were structured in pairs. And so the next one is the heart chakra, or the heart one. It is the blue home. And so it's, again, upside down, representing the non-conceptual thoughts, the seed of the truth body, or Dharmakaya. And then the fourth one, the other one of that pair, the heart and the navel, is the red Ah, or Ah stroke. And in the diagram, it actually does it as an Ah stroke, which is kind of like a very narrow V that comes down to a point. And it may or may not then have some kind of a little squiggly line above it. So this is representing the fire or heat and emptiness wisdom. So it is the seed of the form body or nirmanakaya. So we have those 4 kayas that are also represented here. And so the Ah stroke, the bottom of the 3rd column in the illustration, is the shape of a thin triangle with the point at the top and resembling a thin red candle flame. So when we look at one of those, I don't know if there's the top, the Om up there, you can see one. It has a little crescent, and then it has a circle, and then it has that squiggly line that goes off of that. So that's the squiggly line part of it is the crescent. The bindu and the nada is the nada is the squiggly line. The bindu is the circle. So the crescent, the bindu, and the nada are those 3 parts. Just above the point of the thin triangle, and it is, in this case, it is the crescent, bindu, and nada that represent a flame. So the symbolism here that it's like a flame. In other cases, the Ah stroke itself is visualized as a flame. So a couple of different ways that this is approached. You may want to approach these in sections to become familiar with the visualizations. As you become familiar, then you can combine them as described in the practice below. So the practice below is going to have a couple of different parts to it. And so again, as we set up our practice, we set our intention. As a part of that, we recite the brief Nundro preliminary practice, and then the 9-round breathing that we've just talked about. And then we do the actual practice of the channels. First, the visualization of the 3 channels and the Ah stroke chakras, and syllables or drops. So all of those things that we've been looking at. So the picture in the book is helpful there. And then we began with stillness of body, speech, and mind. Visualize yourself as Vajrayogini or some other yidam. Vajrayogini. No, that's not Vajrayogini. Where's Vajrayogini? She's in one. Oh, she's in the one over there beside the leaf there. Vajravarahi, this was Vajravarahi. Vajravarahi and Vajrayogini are closely related. Or other yidam with consort, transparent like a crystal. So we visualize them as being completely transparent. We're getting more and more actual forms that have been put together with clear plastic or crystal or whatever, so you can see through them. And there's actually a Buddha over there behind you guys that is in the same way, that it's transparent. So they're getting more and more of them are coming out like that represent the way that it's described here. Just below the lower opening of the central channel in the lower abdomen, the navel, is a tiny red ostroke. From the top down, you have a downward facing white lotus with 32 petals and an upside down hum at your crown chakra. So the red lotus with 16 petals and the red om at your throat chakra. A downward blue lotus with the 8 petals, the upside down blue hum at your heart chakra. And the red lotus with the 64 petals and the red ostroke at your navel chakra. So those are the ones that we kind of went through before, being repeated here. And then we pause to contemplate them and then repeat 3 times or more until stability arises. So this is just a visualization part of the practice. And then we are said to dedicate that with the mind of liberation or bodhicitta. I dedicate all merit from this practice for the liberation of all sentient beings. We recite that 3 times, and then post-meditation, following the practice, continue practicing tsalung as much as you can during your daily activities. So you can stop and do those. It helps with memorization of what those are. But it can also be combined with the next practice that we are going to do. They're very closely related, which is inner heat or tummo. So these are a foundational practice for most of the remaining completion stage practices. And this is a more popular kind of a practice that we see. Some yogis specialize in this practice to the degree that they are able to generate enough heat to dry wet clothing on their backs during the cold winter in Tibet. They literally get a wet cloth, wrap it around their body without any other clothing, and go out and sit in this freezing temperature and dry it out and get their body warm enough that you can actually dry it out. Another way that you can try this to see whether it's actually occurring, because this is a physical manifestation, is with a thermometer. Take your temperature with the thermometer, do the practice, and then check. Has it increased by a degree or 2? It's not like a real dramatic increase, but you feel a difference. Also, just experiences of your body can begin to sweat or something like that is another indication that it is occurring. And so this is, the goal here is to master it as a basis for developing our sense of having an illusory body, which is the body of a Buddha. Okay? So the practice, if we're doing it separately, we would set it up as a separate practice twice a day or whatever number of times that we can do. Set our intention, recite the Nundro preliminary practices, do the 9-round breathing. But if you're doing the two of these together, you don't have to repeat all of that. You just go directly to the actual part, which is the tummo, which is divided into 2 cycles that we go through. So the first cycle may repeat until it is comfortable in the process. So we can do it once, or we can do it over and over again until we get it in our practice, our mind, and we can do it. So in the beginning, on the in-breath, the fire or heat in the lower abdomen at the juncture of the side and central channels, so where the side channels enter into the central channel, blazes and fills your body, especially your abdomen, with blissful inner fire or heat. Okay, so when we were just talking about that description and that flame, that's where that flame is, down below the navel in the central channel. And so it's firing up and blazing and creating that heat. And then on the out breath, we do that as we breathe in, then on the out breath, it blazes and melts the red bindu or stroke, or the female drop, at the navel chakra, and then opening the central channel. And the red female drop then ascends up the central channel. Okay, so the flame, the heat is moving up the central channel. And so now we're at the central channel at the heart chakra. And then at that, the red female drop melts away, and the blue hong, blue bindu or hong, opening the channel up to the throat. At the throat is the red drop, which melts, or red bindu, or om. We've actually got 3 different ways of describing these things. Opening the channel that goes up to the crown. And then to the crown, the red female drop melts the white bindu or ham, the male drop that is at the crown, completing the opening of the central channel. So all of those blockages there at each of the chakras have been melted away. So there's no more. Then the next in-breath, the melted white bindu, the ham, the crown, or male drop, bodhicitta, slowly drips down and now open central channel. So we opened it all up, so now it's clear. It can move down, continuously down, into a new red female drop. Okay, it emerges again so that we can repeat this over and over, where you experience a greater bliss inner fire. So then the next part of this, the second cycle of this, so you do those until you're confident with them. And then you go on to the second one. On the out breath of the female drop rises up the open central channel now, because those are continuously open now, and melts a new white drop at your crown. On the in-breath, the drop drips down the open channel into a new red female drop, arousing even greater blissful inner fire. So this gets hotter and hotter. So this is tummo. It's about fire. It's about heat and creating that sensation in our body. And so that is the part that is really the tummo aspect. The first part is getting it started and setting up everything, clearing out the central channel. This part is creating an intensity in terms of the heat. So we continue until signs appear. Physical heat, such as sweat or 1 or 2 degrees of the body temperature, as I mentioned. And then we repeat the second cycle as many times as needed. At the end of each session, breathing naturally, meditate single-pointedly on the inner heat until you achieve stability indicated by the luster, radiance, or translucence of body and surroundings. So the idea, the feeling that everything is stable, there's a sense of luster or even radiance It's a part of this. Now, the radiance here could be in the form of heat radiating out rather than a light kind of radiance. And all of the surroundings and their illusory nature. So it's connecting us more with that illusory nature that we talked about in the completion stage practices a little bit earlier. And so we continue this for 15 to 20 or 30 minutes or as long as you can. And then we dedicate the merit at the end with the mind of liberation. Bodhicitta, I dedicate all merit from this practice for the liberation of all sentient beings. We repeat that 3 times. Post-meditation, following the practice, continue practicing tummo as much as you can during your daily activities. And then the 2 practices of tsalung, visualization, and tummo may be combined into a single practice with the visualization followed by the inner heat practice. When you are able to stabilize the tsalung and tummo, you are able to bring the vital energies or winds into the central channel. Breathe or breath is even in both nostrils. Continue to meditate until the breath becomes increasingly subtle until it is unnoticeable. And so it just becomes more and more subtle until it's no longer noticeable. So we're going to stop here. We're out of time for today, and we'll continue here next time as we move through these different practices. And next time we'll get into the 4 blisses or joys that are a part of this, is the evolution of these practices as a part of that. But we will stop here for today. And so just keep in mind, as a part of this, that we also, if you have questions, you can email me. I'll answer the questions either in the next class or send you a response, an email response to that. And so now we abide softly and deeply with pure awareness, loving kindness, and compassion for all beings, always and always. And more than ever, pray for peace. Thank you.